Hello, I'm Tony Brooks, and this is Agri Arkansas. Today we continue our look into agriculture in each of Arkansas's 6 physiographic regions. The Gulf Coastal Plain encompasses much of the southern part of the state, with the Ouachita Mountains bordering the north and the Delta to the east. As with other physiographic regions in the state, agriculture plays an important role in the Gulf Coastal Plain. Let's take a look.
In the Gulf Coastal Plain, we're a very old landscape. The landscape originally was flooded backwaters, almost like the Gulf of Mexico is today. And it backed up into this region, and as it receded, we had a series of estuaries and beachfronts. So the high sandy ground are the beachfronts, and the lower ground are the estuaries. Given on top of that about 60, 70 million years of exposure, you've got a very leached soil. Soils here are generally non-productive in terms of if you compare them to the bottomland soils, but with proper management and fertilization, you can produce some crops off of that.
The Gulf Coastal Plain was a shallow part of what is today the Gulf of Mexico for much of the last 100 million years. Only about 50 million or so years ago did it come above ocean level, and that's very also because we left a period where the ocean levels were higher, so the ocean has dropped. The rocks are made primarily of gravel and sands and clays that have been eroded out of the Ouachitas over hundreds of millions of years. So it's actually shallow sedimentary rocks there. There are a couple of rivers that flow through it, the Ouachitas and such, where the agriculture along the edges is pretty good because the river floods and leaves that organic mud. There are a couple of areas where the soil actually dries out quite a bit during the summer and creates a dry grass prairie. Prairies usually produce pretty good soils. And so we find some isolated areas, the Hope watermelons or the tomato festivals and such, of a very good agriculture. But overall, it is more small farm for agriculture or large holdings of timberland.
I'm Bruce Alford. We live in southwest Arkansas. We're 30 miles east of Texarkana on Highway 82. We run a unique stocker feeder cattle operation. We're in South Arkansas, and we do have rolling hills, and we do have flat river bottoms. The hills are mostly sandy clay or clay and land, and it works good for us. We use it as well, a good bit, and we cut hay off the hills as well during the summer. And then the river bottoms are, most of the land that we utilize is sandy land, so it can stand, it's good sandy land. It's right on the river, most of it. Most of it's rich sandy land. Most of our land could be farmed, or it could be run cattle on it like we do. We're in the cattle business, so we use it for cattle, but it has some of it in the past that we bought was farmed before we bought it.
We're in Sevier County, just outside the city of Locksburg. I raise poultry. I'm a contract poultry producer. I have 6 houses, which is 96,000 square feet under roof. I get approximately 1 bird per square foot, and I turn that over about 4.5 times a year at about a little over slightly an 8-pound live weight. And then I have beef cattle, mature cow. I'm a cow-calf operation, and I'm currently running about 230 mature cows. And then I hold just a little bit of timberland that I manage a little bit. Part of it's just the edges that have grown up, or some that I've acquired that is grown up in timber that I manage for that as a source of income also. This part of the state is, timber is a huge part of it. A lot in both in the corporate land holdings and individual hold a lot within this. And then when you get away from timber, you get into where a lot of contract poultry producing and livestock cattle. There's a few swine operations, and you get, there's only one place that's row cropped in this county, one small place that lays along Little River. We really produce grass, and we harvest it with cows, and then we have poultry houses that we makes cash flow, because if you don't have some cash flow, you can't make a living.
You know, in Southwest Arkansas, probably the most influential part of the whole area is agriculture, and here we're a big part of the economy, whether it's the cattle industry, row crop, or timber. I happen to be in the cattle business and raise and sell Charolais cattle for use in commercial seed stock producer herds. You know, the thing that probably sticks out to us is family farms are good, and they're good for producing the things and products that we need, and it's also good just for general use of the land. We're doing things to feed the country. You know, that's the main thing we need to keep in mind, is that we're feeding the people.
The economy of agriculture is small farms here. They've been historically that way. Truck crops were really important for this area. As beef cattle become more prevalent, its labor force became harder to get, and primarily California being able to grow and ship fruits and vegetables all over the country without fail, it was cost more to produce than we could get from the product, so those actually dropped out. The last vestiges are some of the Hope melons in this part of the area, and the peaches around Nashville. Those were sort of the last holdouts for the conversion from a fruit and truck farm station to a beef cattle. I think the Gulf Coastal Plain, the biggest bragging rights is that we can produce a very high quality pine saw timber. We can produce a very high quality beef cattle product. We do not need a lot of inputs besides the poultry litter, so we can produce a very cost-effective product on both sides. And I think that's really the claim to fame that we have. We also have very little demand on the groundwater as compared to rice production and some other row crop production. I think the future of agriculture in the Gulf Coastal Plain is going to be our geographic location compared to larger metropolitan areas. As fuel prices increase, there's going to be a larger demand for specialty type crops. And I'm talking about coming back from where we were in the 1920s of growing fruits and vegetables for a fresh consumption market. The movement where we have knowing your farmer, knowing where your food comes from is going to really put a lot of pressure on the large market grocery stores to have farmers identified close by that they can say, well, this farmer from Hope, Arkansas produced these watermelons, and here's where his field is located.
This is an area where you have to work very hard to get a living, and these families have learned how to do it for generations. This is their home. This is where they want to stay. I don't foresee major changes in their production, but for many communities and many families, this is the part of Arkansas that is their heritage, and they will stay there. They will continue to produce as best they can. I don't see a lot of outside competition for the types of products they're producing right now, so that certainly is an advantage.
There, go, Trenton. Put that over there.
We'll talk more about agriculture in the Gulf Coastal Plain in a few moments with Dr. Victor Ford, Director and Professor with the University of Arkansas's Division of Agriculture Research and Extension Center in Hope, and with Bruce Jackson, a rancher and farmer in Sevier County. But first, timber management.
trees grow naturally where we are here in Arkansas, in South Arkansas. That is the most natural thing for our land to produce. There has been what I call an explosion of technology the last several years. I'm personally very excited about it because we have a lot to choose from when it comes to our genetics. We can pick trees that are better suited to our soils, whereas maybe 20 years ago the trees were selected and managed just to have more aggressive growth. Now we can get genetics of trees that tend to grow straighter, that might make a higher percentage of utility poles in a stand, genetics where the trees have more natural resistance to certain diseases. The limb size is smaller so that we can plant the trees further apart and have shorter rotations without it degrading the value of the wood that much. When you look at managing timber on a farm, you've got to look at your soils, your lands. Is it uplands? Is it hillsides? Is it mountainous areas? Is it gently sloping hills, creek bottoms, or river bottoms? And on our farm, about half of our land is subject to overflowing. When we get lots of rain at any given time, our farm could be half of it underwater. And a lot of that land is not suited to growing pines. Our pines are fairly short rotations, 25 to 30 years of age. Our hardwoods, on the other hand, are fairly long rotations, 60 to 80 years. And so we have a lot of soils that are not suited to pine. They've always were in hardwoods, and they'll always need to be in hardwoods. For those lands, when we clear cut a stand of those and we replant oaks there, you can forget about it, any income for the next couple of generations. But that's a part of what stewardship is. We're caretakers of the land. Even though it's not going to be producing any significant income for a long time, it's still a part of our farm. But we look to the other parts where we grow pines, and we're very aggressive about that, and we push them, and they perform financially very good. So it all kind of balances out. One area kind of helps pay for the other area.
We have seen in the state of Arkansas over $500 million in new investments in the forest products industry within the last year. And so that means that we're starting to kind of climb out of that hole that we saw maybe from 2008 to around 2012 or so. So you have markets for lumber. The housing market really drives the forest products industry. We have a great, strong pulp and paper community here in the state of Arkansas. Private landowners are looking for new opportunities, and we've seen announcements within the past year or so of 2 new pellet facilities down in South Arkansas, which is, that means new markets for folks that are growing that fiber out there, and that's really important.
This kind of illustrates what's been happening with the way we manage trees. This little slice right here is the way that a lot of timber used to be grown in Arkansas, and this piece here is what we're trying to do now. I tell people sometimes, if you could give me 20 acres for 40 years and let us grow those trees the way that we know how today, with the help that we have out there with the foresters, I could take that 20 acres and at the end of 40 years, we could pay off your house mortgage, we could send your kids through college, you'd pay attention to it.
The worst thing that we can do for our forests is nothing. As long as we continue to sustainably manage those, using best management practices and using the kinds of concepts that we see now as certification becomes more popular, we're going to have everything that we want out of our forests in the state of Arkansas.
If you'd like more information about the potential of timber on land that you own, contact the Arkansas Forestry Association at arcforest.org. Throughout the year, towns all over Arkansas host festivals related to agriculture in their area. In the Gulf Coastal Plain alone, you have the Bradley County Pink Tomato Festival and the Hope Watermelon Festival, among others. Recently, in the Arkansas River Valley, we were able to visit the Altus Grape Festival.
We are Altus, Arkansas, in downtown at the Altus Grape Festival. This is our 31st annual festival, and it's held every year the last weekend of July to celebrate the grape. It's a wonderful family event because we have booths that have items for all ages. We've got the child bounce around. We've got the barrel train that just loves to take kids on rides. There's a lot of activities in our playground area for children. And of course then all the adults love it because we have wonderful craft booths with jewelry and wood and silver and metal, not to mention the wine and juice tasting. And we celebrate the grape because Altus is known as the wine capital of Arkansas. We have the most vineyards and wineries in this area, and we truly enjoy the grape and of course the juice and the wine that comes from it. Oh my goodness, we've had so much fun. We've had grape stomps, Friday night street dance, Bacchus look-alike contest, and we're going to have some more contests and fun grape-related activities this afternoon, and a lot more grape stomping going on, live music on stage, awesome arts and craft vendors from all over, and a whole lot of political candidates. And we have winemakers from, as well as Arkansas, all states around, and as far away as Florida, who bring their wines to our festival. We also have the amateur winemaking competition that goes on that's in conjunction with this festival. There are a lot of little winemakers at home and some amateur winemakers, and we really like to show the appreciation that they are making use of the grape and making some wine. And so we have the Altus Viticulture area, and that is why we started celebrating the grape again with the annual festivities to show our appreciation to the grape growers and the winemakers who bring thousands of tourists to Arkansas every year. So we tell everybody that you'll come, visit Altus, sample the wines, and we know you're going to find something you like. And all the wineries also have tours and tasting going on at the same time as we are, and all the wineries are here in the park in Altus, and people love it. They're having a good time.
For a complete list of upcoming Arkansas festivals, visit the Arkansas Department of Parks and Tourism website at arkansas.com. Joining us now is Dr. Victor Ford, Director and Professor with the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture, Research and Extension Center in Hope, and Bruce Jackson, a rancher and farmer in Sevier County. Dr. Ford, let's start with you. When we're talking about the Gulf Coastal Plain in Arkansas, some of the counties we're talking about are the south and southwest, counties like Miller, Little River, Columbia, Sevier, but probably about 16 counties.
About 16, 17 counties. It's everything south of the Ouachitas, and you're looking at like the southern end of Pike County, the southern end of Howard County, and as you go south and west, you're going into this deposits that were laid down by an ancient ocean, an ancient gulf. 23 million years ago.
Is it noticeable when you get into the coastal plain what the soil looks like?
Yes,
can you tell?
It's the red soils. It's the soils that you associate with this old landscape. What you're seeing in those orange colors is a lot of iron. There's a lot of iron and aluminum. The pHs are very low. The acidity levels are high. You can see some areas that have a black soil. That's what left over from the estuaries where you had a lot of organic matter. And you can dig up seashells and shark's teeth and those kinds of things. So it's a very old landscape. It's more gentle than the Ouachitas. There'll be some rolling toward the northern part. But as you get southern part of the state, it flattens out.
Okay. You know, looking at those pieces, diversity and tenacity are two words that come to mind when we look at agriculture and the farmers down in your guys' part of the country. Would that be fair?
You have to have a special breed of people to make a living on this hard scrabble ground sometimes.
Bruce, you run cattle and farm in Sevier County, and we talked about cash flow with a lot of the farmers down there like you involved in cattle, poultry, and timber, taking advantage of every opportunity of production. And how have you used the resources that you have at your disposal to make your operation more productive?
Well, the poultry operation gives you a steady income along, and then you generate poultry litter, which is excellent quality fertilizer that you need on your ground. And so then you fertilize your ground, run cattle on that, you manage your timber a little bit, for some of those things, even if I don't manage some as well as I should, it still generates me sort of like a savings account that I'm savings up. So during hard times or terrible droughts, I can go out there and sort of reach into that, harvest a little bit of that timber, improve the quality at the same time, put a little money into my cash flow to make up for drought, low cow prices and such as that. And so you have to sort of make a plan and then adjust it as whatever nature or prices come along too. You have to keep constantly being adjusting what your goal is. You have a goal out there, but all your plans getting there constantly change as the weather throws you curveball sometimes, just like we turned into a drought right now all of a sudden.
Well, we're talking about drought. We've talked in previous programs about how a dry year or two in a row can have a devastating effect on cattle and dairy. Do we find that this region is more susceptible to drought?
As you get to the southern and western part of the state, we get more drier, more prolonged droughts. And you can see that in the historical records. There's a law that I learned in school when I was a young undergraduate called Hopkins' bioclimatic law, and the further west from the Mississippi River you get and the further south you get, the hotter and drier you are. In fact, our station is there because we develop a lot of varieties of fruits and vegetables in the Fayetteville, Clarksville area, and we use our facilities to test them for hotter and dry climates.
Okay. We talk about row crops, and some row crops there around the river Ouachita and the Little River bottoms. What are some of the primary row crops that we have down there?
Oh, we've got the whole gamut of beans, rice. We've lost cotton, of course, as we lost gins, as those things went down. But we still grow corn and milo or grain sorghum and beans, and those are the main row crops still there. And there's a lot. We get over into Red River bottoms there along the through there, and there's a little bit of cotton all the way down in the south end of Red River bottoms because it's one of those good bends of excellent grounds. That in our part of the county where our topsoil is pretty shallow before we start hitting the subsoil, we can't farm anymore, in these times.
I found it interesting. We talk about production changes that do occur over the years, and Dr. Ford, you talked about back in the 20s, the smaller truck farms that produced the fruits and vegetables, but as cattle industry grew, with the cost of fuel, with transporting those products from California, and this movement, this fresh market, people want to know where their food's coming from. And I drew the example earlier when we were visiting about Hope watermelons. If you market watermelons in central Arkansas and northern Arkansas, those are Hope watermelons, and those are the watermelons people want. Could we see that transferred to other products?
We can see that transferred a lot. Hope has traditionally, back in the 20s, I mentioned cantaloupes and strawberries. They shipped them all over the country. Nashville peaches still have a name recognition in the local area. So there's a lot of opportunities to market those, particularly the Hope melons. The economics and the labor market make it somewhat difficult now to grow those fruit and vegetable crops, but I think as the demand increases and the return on the farm products, you're going to see a lot of people go into that kind of industry in the very near future.
And you talked about there's not as much demand on the groundwater, so we could see irrigation of some of that acreage maybe to diversify into those crops.
And I think we've got a group of people that they're still small in numbers, unfortunately, but wanting to get into farming. And some of that sort of truck patch, as we say, which is really a little different than what it'd be today, but that they're looking at that as a way to get their foot in the door and get started. And as they invest a lot, they have to irrigate because they cannot withstand a crop failure because they have so much invested in that crop. To get it close, you have to have water to finish it. You can't stand the loss because you've invested so much up to that point. And that's one thing that drives thing is that even a small fresh produce operation has a lot of money invested to get everything up just close.
Right. Got about a minute left. What about the introduction of new specialty crops? We're seeing more acreage in other parts of the state and crops like peanuts and potatoes. Is that a possibility there?
It's a possibility. We're seeing a lot of folks really interested in some really good alternatives in terms of blackberries, muscadine grapes. We've had several of the grape producers from up in the central part of the state really look hard about getting people involved, growing at least 10 acres of muscadine so they can help supply the juices that they need up there for their business. But there's a lot of opportunity on that. Strawberries right now have a really big inroad in that part of the state beginning to, particularly with the advent of high tunnel houses.
Is this something that you are considering?
Personally, no. I'm sort of at the point in life I want to go out and tackle, but I am encouraging young people to go that way and that are wanting to get their foot in the door.
Right.
And there's several programs being developed that have made it much more easy to get fresh produce into schools, which is a huge consumption of fresh produce, fresh vegetables. And there's a program that's at the Arkansas Department of Ag is helping support those people, and there's people that are, like I said, I know people that are talking about doing it to get in, and those opportunities are there today that weren't there 10 years ago.
Very good. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us. We certainly enjoyed visiting with you. That's all the time we have for now. Thank you for staying with us. We hope you'll join us again next time for Agri Arkansas. I'm Tony Brooks.
Major funding for this program provided by the Moving Image Trust Fund. Additional funding for this program provided by the Arkansas Agriculture Department.